The cold November rain fell like a shroud over the cemetery, clinging to Liam's thin suit jacket and chilling him to the bone. It was a pathetic sort of grief, he thought, one that felt as hollow as the platitudes being offered by the few mourners who had gathered. His father had been a simple man, a quiet man, and his passing was met with the same quiet indifference that had marked much of his life. Liam stood apart from the small cluster of people, his gaze fixed on the mahogany casket being lowered into the damp earth. He felt a presence beside him, not of comfort, but of judgment. It was Clara, his wife. She was a vision in a black designer dress that probably cost more than the entire funeral service. Her expression was one of barely concealed impatience, her perfectly manicured fingers tapping a staccato rhythm on her expensive leather handbag. "Is this almost over?" she whispered, her voice a sharp, irritating buzz next to his ear. Liam didn't answer, his throat tight with a grief she could never understand. He felt a wave of shame wash over him, not for his father, but for his wife's coldness. Beside her stood her brother Marcus, a man whose arrogance was tailored into the very fabric of his bespoke suit. Marcus looked around the modest cemetery with a sneer, his eyes cataloguing the simple headstones as if they were personal affronts to his sense of style. "Really scraped the bottom of the barrel for this place, didn't he?" Marcus murmured to Clara, loud enough for Liam to hear. Clara offered a small, cruel smile in return. "He lived how he died," she replied, "without making an impression on anyone who mattered." The words cut through Liam like shards of glass. He had spent 10 years married to this woman, 10 years of enduring her family's casual cruelty, always believing that beneath the polished, expensive veneer there was a heart he had once fallen in love with. He was a fool. The service concluded with a final prayer that felt empty and rushed. As the others dispersed, a man in a somber grey suit approached Liam. He was older, with kind eyes that held a hint of sorrow. "Mr. Liam Sterling?" the man asked, his voice gentle. "I am Mr. Thompson. I was your father's lawyer." Liam was surprised. His father, a retired librarian, had a lawyer? "He wanted you to have this," Mr. Thompson said, handing Liam a thick, cream-coloured envelope, sealed with wax. His instructions were very specific. "You are to open it only when you are alone and feel the time is right." Liam took the envelope, its weight feeling strange and significant in his hand. Clara watched the exchange with narrowed eyes, her interest piqued by the formal appearance of the lawyer. "What is that?" she demanded as they walked back to her sleek, black sedan. "From my father's lawyer," Liam said, tucking the envelope into his inside pocket. "A lawyer? What could he possibly have left you? A collection of overdue library books?" Marcus chuckled, a harsh barking sound. Liam ignored him, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead. The drive back to the house they shared was silent and tense. It was Clara's house, really, a fact she and her family never let him forget. It was a sprawling modern structure of glass and steel, a cold and sterile place that had never felt like a home. He had worked 2 jobs for years to help with the down payment, a contribution that Clara now referred to as his meagre little fund. When they pulled into the driveway, Liam felt a deep sense of dread. Something was wrong. 2 of his old, battered suitcases were sitting on the porch, their contents spilling out slightly where the latches had failed. "What's this?" Liam asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara got out of the car, her posture rigid and unforgiving. "It's over, Liam," she said, her tone as cold as the November air. Marcus emerged from the car with a predatory grin, walking straight to the porch. "She's done with you," Marcus spat, kicking one of the suitcases. It tumbled down the stone steps, bursting open and scattering Liam's worn clothes across the wet lawn. A few faded photographs, one of his mother and father on their wedding day, lay face up in a puddle. "You're a charity case, Liam, a project," Clara continued, her voice rising with a theatrical flourish. "I tried to elevate you, to make you into something more than the son of a pathetic little librarian, but you can't polish a stone." Liam stood frozen, the rain mixing with the tears he refused to let fall. He was numb, shattered. This was a nightmare. Marcus grabbed the second suitcase and, with a grunt of exertion, hurled it off the porch. It landed with a sickening thud near the first, his few worldly possessions now a sad, sodden mess on the perfectly manicured grass.
"Get out of here!" Marcus snarled, his face contorted with disgust. "You don't belong here. You never did." Clara reached into her handbag and pulled out a thin stack of bills. She threw it at his feet. The money scattered in the wind and landed in the wet grass. "Here," she said, her voice dripping with condescending pity. "For a motel, I'm not completely heartless." But she was utterly and completely heartless. Liam looked from her cold, beautiful face to the wreckage of his life on the lawn. He had given her everything. He had supported her through her MBA, working nights as a janitor on top of his day job at the factory, so she could pursue her ambitions. He had believed in her, loved her, defended her to his father, who had always seen the cold ambition in her eyes. And for what? To be discarded like trash on the day he buried his father. The cruelty was devastating. He bent down slowly, his movements stiff, and began to pick up his scattered belongings.
He didn't touch the money. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. He stuffed his clothes back into the broken suitcases, his hands trembling with a rage so profound it felt like a physical illness. He could feel their eyes on him, judging him, enjoying his humiliation. He said nothing. There was nothing left to say. With his broken bags in hand, he turned and started walking down the long, winding driveway, not looking back. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he had to get away from them, from the life that had turned out to be a cruel and elaborate lie. As he walked, his hand instinctively went to his pocket, feeling the crisp edges of the envelope from Mr. Thompson. It was the only thing he had left, a final mystery from a father he had loved and a life he now desperately missed. The rain continued to fall, washing over a world that had suddenly gone dark. Clara and Marcus watched him go, two perfect figures of contempt framed by the cold architecture of their perfect house. "Good riddance," Marcus scoffed, turning to go inside. Clara lingered for a moment longer, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes before it was replaced by a look of hard satisfaction. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. "Richard, it's done," she said, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "He's gone. Yes, tonight. I'll see you at 8. She ended the call and walked back into the house, leaving Liam's past to soak in the rain. Liam found a cheap motel on the edge of town, a place with flickering fluorescent lights and the lingering smell of disinfectant. He paid for one night with the few dollars he had in his wallet, his pride a raw, open wound. The room was small and damp, the wallpaper peeling in the corners. He dropped his broken suitcases on the floor and sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, the springs creaking like an old church door. The silence in the room was deafening. He was truly alone. He had lost his father, his wife, and his home all in one day. The weight of it all pressed down on him, a crushing physical force that made it hard to breathe. He thought back over the years, searching for the signs he must have missed. He remembered how Clara's affection had grown more and more conditional, offered only when he did something that advanced her social standing. He remembered the way Marcus would joke about his blue-collar job, the condescending pats on the back, the thinly veiled insults about his simple tastes. He had explained it all away, telling himself they were just different, that their world of wealth and status had different rules. He had wanted so badly to believe in the love he thought they shared, the future he thought they were building. He had built it all on a foundation of lies. Their entire world was a fragile facade, he now realized. Clara and Marcus were the children of a moderately successful manufacturing business, Sterling Industries, a company founded by their grandfather. After their father's retirement, Marcus had taken over as CEO, running it with a reckless ambition that prioritized flashy growth over stable foundations. They lived a life of performative wealth, leasing luxury cars, renting vacation homes, and running up enormous debts to maintain their image. They saw Liam not as family, but as a blemish on that image, a reminder of a more humble beginning that Clara was desperate to escape. His usefulness had expired the moment she graduated with her MBA and secured a high-paying job at a prestigious firm, a job Marcus had helped her get through his connections. Liam was the ladder she had kicked away once she reached the top. After hours of sitting in the dark, his mind a whirlwind of pain and regret, he remembered the envelope. He pulled it from his damp jacket pocket. The wax seal was embossed with a simple, elegant S. His hands shook as he broke the seal and unfolded the thick paper inside. There were 2 items, a small, ornate silver key and a letter written in his father's familiar, neat handwriting. "My dearest son," the letter began, "if you are reading this, then I am gone. I am sorry for the secrets I had to keep, but I did it to protect you. I wanted you to live a normal life, to find happiness based on who you are, not what you have." Liam's eyes filled with tears as he read the words. "The world of wealth is a corrupting one, Liam. It can turn good people into monsters. I have seen it happen. I never wanted that for you, but now the choice must be yours. The key is to a safety deposit box at the Northgate Private Bank in the city. The box number is 713. Go there. What you find inside is your birthright, your true inheritance. It is not just money, son. It is a responsibility, a legacy. Use it wisely.
Use it to be the good man I always knew you were." The letter ended with a final, heartbreaking sentence. "Know that I was always proud of you, prouder than you could ever imagine. Love, Dad." Liam held the letter to his chest, the paper absorbing his silent tears. A new feeling began to push through the grief, a flicker of purpose. He didn't know what his father meant, what could possibly be in a safety deposit box that a retired librarian could leave behind. But it was a path. It was a direction in a world where he had suddenly become completely lost. Meanwhile, across town, in a glittering high-rise restaurant, Clara was laughing. She clinked her champagne glass against Richard's, a handsome, silver-haired man who radiated an aura of old money and power. "To new beginnings," Richard said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "And to shedding dead weight," Clara added, taking a delicate sip.
Marcus was there too, already 3 glasses in and boasting loudly about a new business deal he was about to close. "This acquisition is going to put Sterling Industries on the map," he declared to anyone who would listen. "We're talking global. I'm taking my grandfather's little company into the stratosphere." They were confident, untouchable, convinced of their own superiority. They had excised the one part of their lives that didn't fit their narrative of success, and they felt lighter for it. The thought of Liam, alone in some dingy motel, was a source of amusement, a funny little anecdote they could tell their friends. They had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was about to crumble into dust. They had no idea that the quiet librarian, whose memory they mocked, had been the silent architect of their entire world. The next morning, Liam used the last of his money to buy a bus ticket to the city. The journey was long and uncomfortable, giving him too much time to think. He felt like a ghost, invisible to the other passengers, a man without a past or a future. He clutched the silver key in his pocket, its cold metal, a tangible link to his father's last wishes. The Northgate Private Bank was an imposing building of granite and brass, a temple dedicated to the quiet power of old money. Liam, in his worn clothes, felt completely out of place as he walked through the heavy revolving doors. A stern-looking woman at the reception desk looked him up and down with disdain. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. "I'm here to access a safety deposit box," Liam said, his voice quiet but steady. "Number 713. The woman's expression shifted slightly. She typed the number into her computer, and her eyebrows shot up. "One moment, sir," she said, her tone suddenly respectful. She made a quick phone call, her voice a hushed whisper. A few moments later, a side door opened, and Mr. Thompson emerged, the same lawyer from the funeral. "Mr. Sterling," he said, with a warm, reassuring smile. "We've been expecting you. Please, come with me." Liam followed him through a series of hushed corridors and into a large, luxuriously appointed office overlooking the city. "Please, sit," Mr. Thompson said, gesturing to a leather armchair. "I don't understand," Liam said, feeling overwhelmed. "My father, he was a librarian," Mr. Thompson smiled gently. "Your father was a very private man, Liam. He was also, forgive the term, a genius." He explained that Liam's grandfather had not been a poor immigrant, as the family story went, but a brilliant mathematician who made a fortune in early tech stocks and then retreated from the world, terrified of what the wealth would do to his family. He raised Liam's father to value knowledge and humility above all else. "Your father inherited that fortune," Mr. Thompson continued, "but he never touched it for himself. He lived simply, as you know, but he didn't let the money stagnate. He became an investor, a silent, invisible one. He built an empire." Liam stared at him, his mind struggling to process the information. It sounded like a fantasy, a ridiculous dream. "Let's go down to the vault," Mr. Thompson said, sensing his disbelief. They rode a silent elevator deep into the bowels of the bank. The vault door was a masterpiece of engineering, a foot of polished steel. Inside, the air was cool and still. Mr. Thompson led him to box 713. He used his own key, then gestured for Liam to use the silver one. The lock clicked open with a satisfying thud. Inside was not cash or gold. It was a stack of meticulously organized legal documents. Mr. Thompson lifted them out and carried them to a private viewing room. He laid them out on a large mahogany table. "Your father created a network of holding companies and trusts," the lawyer explained, his voice calm and methodical. "It was his way of managing the assets without being in the spotlight. You, Liam, are the sole heir and beneficiary of this entire structure." He pointed to the first document. It was the charter for a holding company called Argentum Holdings. "Argentum is the parent company," Mr. Thompson said. "It holds controlling interests in dozens of other businesses, real estate, technology, manufacturing." He paused, and his eyes met Liam's. "It is also the majority shareholder of a company called Sterling Industries." Liam's blood ran cold. "Sterling Industries?" he repeated, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Clara's family company?" "Not exactly," Mr. Thompson corrected him gently. "It was never their company. Your father provided the seed money to their grandfather, a man he respected. In exchange, he took a 90% ownership stake, held through a series of shell corporations. He allowed the family to run it, to put their name on it, as long as it was managed responsibly." The room started to spin. It was all a lie. Their pride, their status, their name on the building. It was all a gift from the man they had scorned. The house Clara and I lived in, Liam stammered. Mr. Thompson slid another document across the table. A property deed, held in a trust of which you are now the sole trustee. Your father bought it years ago. He allowed them to live there, rent-free, as a kindness. The irony was so profound, so devastatingly cruel, that Liam almost laughed. He had been kicked out of his own house. He had been treated like a peasant in a kingdom that he, in fact, owned entirely. Recently, Mr. Thompson continued, his tone growing serious, your father had become concerned about the direction Marcus was taking the company. Reckless expansion, creative accounting. He was preparing to intervene before he fell ill. He looked at Liam, his expression grave. That responsibility now falls to you. You are, for all intents and purposes, one of the wealthiest men in the country. You own Sterling Industries, their home, their cars, everything. It is all yours. Liam sat back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. He stared at the papers, at the signatures, at the cold, hard proof of this unbelievable reality. The humiliation he had felt on the porch, the pain of Clara's betrayal, the sting of Marcus's contempt, it all swirled in his mind, mixing with the sudden, terrifying weight of this immense power. He thought of his father's letter. Use it to be the good man I always knew you were. What would a good man do? Would a good man forgive? He looked at Mr. Thompson, and the lawyer saw a change in his eyes. The grief and confusion were still there, but beneath them, a cold, hard resolve was beginning to form. It was the look of a man who had been pushed too far, a man who had endured his last insult. "What do I need to sign?" Liam asked, his voice devoid of all emotion. For the next hour, Mr. Thompson walked him through the process. Liam signed papers that transferred control of the trusts, activated his power of attorney, and officially installed him as the head of Argentum Holdings. With each signature he felt a piece of the old, passive Liam flake away, replaced by someone new, someone colder, more focused. This was not about revenge, and he told himself that over and over. This was about justice. It was about restoring the honor of his father, whose generosity had been met with such vile contempt. "The plan should be surgical," Liam said, the words feeling foreign yet natural on his tongue. "I don't want them to see it coming. I want them to feel their world collapsing for reasons they can't understand." Mr. Thompson nodded, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "We can start with the financials," he suggested. "Argentum Holdings is the primary guarantor of Sterling Industries' line of credit. We can freeze it. Then we can initiate a full forensic audit of their books. I suspect we will find irregularities." "Do it," Liam said without hesitation. "The house is simpler," the lawyer continued. "As the trustee, you can terminate their residency at any time, a standard 30-day eviction notice." "Send it," Liam commanded. They spent another hour mapping out the strategy. It was a quiet, elegant plan, using the very tools of the world Clara and Marcus worshipped, finance, law, contracts, to systematically dismantle it. There would be no loud proclamations, no angry confrontations, just a series of quiet, devastating blows delivered from the shadows. When he left the bank, Liam felt like a different man. The city streets no longer seemed intimidating. He checked into a 5-star hotel, the suite larger than the entire house he had been thrown out of. From his window, he could see the glittering lights of the city spread out before him like a kingdom. His kingdom. He thought of Clara and Marcus laughing over champagne, blissfully unaware of the storm that was about to break over their heads. A cold smile touched his lips for the first time in days. The game had changed. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. Marcus was in his opulent office, shouting at an assistant over the temperature of his coffee when an urgent email arrived from their bank. Subject: immediate freeze on line of credit. He scoffed, assuming it was a clerical error. He called his personal banker, a man he played golf with, expecting a quick apology and a resolution. He was sent to voicemail. He called again, voicemail. A knot of unease began to form in his stomach. He tried to process a large payment to a supplier. The transaction was declined. Panic began to set in. By noon, a certified letter arrived. It was from a law firm he had never heard of, announcing a full, top-to-bottom forensic audit of Sterling Industries, initiated by the majority shareholder. "Majority shareholder?" he yelled to his CFO. "We're the majority shareholders." The CFO, a nervous man named Peterson, looked pale. "Technically, sir, the family trust only holds 10%. The rest is owned by a consortium of investment groups, all under the umbrella of Argentum Holdings." "Then get Argentum on the phone," Marcus roared. But no one at Argentum would take his call. It was like shouting into a void. Clara's world began to unravel in a much more public fashion. She was at a high-end boutique, treating herself to a new wardrobe for a weekend getaway with Richard. When she presented her platinum credit card, it was declined.
"That's impossible," she snapped at the young sales assistant. "Try it again." It was declined again. Flushed with embarrassment, she tried another card. Declined, and another. Declined. Her face burned with humiliation as she stormed out of the store, leaving a pile of expensive clothes on the counter. She called Marcus, her voice a shrill cry of indignation. "What is going on? My cards aren't working." "We have bigger problems than your shopping habits," he shot back, the terror evident in his voice. "The bank has cut us off. We're being audited." Disbelief turned to panic. They scrambled, calling in favors, trying to leverage their connections, but every door was politely but firmly closed in their faces. It was as if they had become ghosts overnight, their influence and power evaporating into thin air. The cascade effect was swift and brutal. The audit, led by a team of relentless accountants hired by Mr. Thompson, quickly uncovered years of Marcus's fraudulent activities. He had been cooking the books, inflating profits to secure loans for his lavish lifestyle and embezzling company funds. An anonymous tip, courtesy of Mr. Thompson, was sent to the financial regulators. News of the investigation leaked to the press. "Sterling Industries under investigation for financial fraud," the headlines screamed. Their stock price plummeted. Key clients, spooked by the scandal, began pulling their multi-million-dollar contracts. The company was in a death spiral. Liam watched it all unfold from the calm, detached quiet of his hotel suite. He read the news reports, his expression unreadable. Mr. Thompson provided daily updates, his voice a low, steady presence on the other end of the phone. The plan was working perfectly. One evening, Liam's phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered and was met with the sound of Clara sobbing. "Liam!" she cried, her voice thick with a desperate, manufactured pity. "Liam, I need your help. We're in trouble." "It's all a horrible misunderstanding." He listened silently as she spun a tale of jealous rivals and corporate sabotage. "I know we ended things badly," she continued, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "I was upset about your father. I wasn't thinking clearly. I miss you, Liam." The manipulation was so blatant, so pathetic, that he almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "We just need a small loan," she begged. "Just to tide us over until we sort this mess out. 50,000? You must have something saved up." Liam remained silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry, Clara," he said,
his voice polite and distant. "I can't help you." But, but why not?" she stammered, the shock clear in her voice. "I have my own problems to deal with," he said simply, and then he hung up. He stared at the phone, feeling a strange sense of closure. The old Liam would have fallen for her lies, would have emptied his meagre savings to help the woman who had shattered his heart. But the old Liam was gone, buried under the weight of her cruelty. The final blow came a week later. A legal notice was delivered to the house. It was a formal eviction order. They had 30 days to vacate the premises. Clara stared at the document, her mind refusing to comprehend the words. Evicted? From their own home? It was impossible. Marcus, now a shell of his former arrogant self, slumped into a chair, his face ashen. "It's over," he whispered. "We've lost everything." The 30 days passed in a blur of frantic phone calls, failed legal challenges, and mounting despair. Their friends abandoned them. Richard stopped returning Clara's calls. They were pariahs, their social standing destroyed as completely as their finances. On the final day, a fleet of moving trucks pulled into the long driveway. Professional movers, hired by the trust, began to systematically empty the house of its contents. Clara and Marcus stood on the lawn, watching as their life was packed into boxes. They were hysterical, screaming at the movers, threatening lawsuits, but the men simply ignored them, working with a quiet, efficient indifference. It was then that a sleek, black car, a Rolls-Royce, purred silently up the driveway and came to a stop. The back door opened. Liam stepped out. He was not the man they remembered. The worn, ill-fitting suit was gone, replaced by a tailored masterpiece of dark wool that fit him perfectly. His hair was cut, his posture was confident, and his eyes held a look of cold, unwavering authority. He looked like he owned the world. Clara and Marcus stared at him, their mouths agape. Confusion warred with disbelief on their faces. Liam walked slowly, deliberately, up the stone steps of the porch, stopping at the exact spot where Marcus had thrown his bags. He looked down at the empty space, then his eyes met theirs. "It's a beautiful house," he said, his voice calm and clear, carrying easily in the quiet air. "My father had good taste." "What are you doing here, Liam?" Clara finally managed to choke out, her voice trembling. "Have you come to gloat?" "Gloat!" Liam echoed, a small, humorless smile touching his lips. "No, I've come to collect what's mine." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting them absorb the full, shocking impact of his presence. "You spent 10 years treating me like I was nothing," he began, his voice dropping low, each word a carefully placed stone. "You treated my father's memory with contempt. You thought you were royalty, and we were the dirt beneath your feet." He took a step closer, his gaze locking onto Clara's. "You threw me out of my own home, Clara. You threw my clothes on the lawn and laughed while I picked them out of the mud." "Your home," Marcus scoffed, a pathetic echo of his former arrogance. "This is our home."
"Our family built this." Liam's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the funny part, Marcus. That's the part you never understood. You never built anything. You were tenants, living on the charity of a man you despised." The full, horrifying truth began to dawn on Clara's face. Her eyes widened in dawning horror. "What you didn't know," Liam continued, his voice like ice, "is that my quiet, simple father, the librarian you mocked, owned this house. He owned your company. He owned every car you drove, every piece of jewelry you wore, every drop of champagne you drank." He gestured around at the sprawling estate, the moving trucks, the wreckage of their lives. "And now," he said, the final words landing like a judge's sentence, "I own it all." A strangled gasp escaped Clara's lips. Marcus lunged forward, his face purple with rage, a primal scream tearing from his throat. "You lie!" Before he could reach Liam, two large men in dark suits, Liam's security detail, stepped forward and intercepted him, holding him back easily as he struggled and cursed. Clara simply collapsed. She fell to her knees on the manicured lawn, her perfect facade shattering into a million pieces. A raw, animalistic wail of despair rose from her, a sound of pure, undiluted agony. She clawed at the grass, her designer dress now stained with dirt, a pathetic, broken figure in the ruins of her own making. Liam watched her for a moment, his expression unreadable. There was no triumph, no joy, just a vast, empty sense of justice served. He turned to leave, his back straight, his shoulders unburdened for the first time in years. As he reached his car, he paused and looked back at them one last time. "By the way," he said, his voice carrying over Clara's sobs, "my private jet is waiting. I have a foundation to run." He didn't wait for a reaction.
He got into the car, and it pulled away silently, leaving them behind in the wreckage of their cruel, empty lives. The aftermath was as swift as the collapse. Marcus was arrested and charged with multiple counts of financial fraud and embezzlement. Faced with overwhelming evidence, he was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. The family name, once a symbol of local prestige, became synonymous with scandal and disgrace. Clara was left with nothing. Her friends, her connections, her wealth, all gone. The last Liam heard, she was working as a waitress in a roadside diner 2 states away, her beauty faded, her spirit broken, haunted by the ghost of the life she had so carelessly destroyed. Liam, however, did not embrace the extravagant lifestyle he could have so easily afforded. Guided by his father's memory and the quiet wisdom of Mr. Thompson, he liquidated the more ostentatious assets. He sold Sterling Industries, but only after ensuring all the honest, hard-working employees would keep their jobs under the new, ethical ownership. He kept the house, but he didn't live in it. He turned it into a temporary home for families who had lost everything, a sanctuary built on the ashes of arrogance. His true passion became the Sterling Foundation, an organization he created in his father's name. He used his immense fortune to fund scholarships for underprivileged students, provide seed money for small businesses, and support community libraries across the country. He found purpose, not in having, but in giving. He lived modestly, preferring a quiet apartment in the city to a sprawling mansion. He found that his father was right. The simple things held the most value. One evening, at a small charity event for one of his foundation's projects, he met a woman named Evelyn. She was a social worker, her eyes bright with a fierce intelligence and a deep, genuine compassion for others. They talked for hours, not about money or status, but about books, about helping people, about building a better world. For the first time in a very long time, Liam felt a real, unburdened happiness. A few months later, they stood on the tarmac of a private airfield. The jet was not for a lavish vacation, but to fly emergency medical supplies to a disaster-stricken area. Evelyn looked at him, her hand in his. "Your father would be so proud of you, Liam," she said softly. Liam looked up at the sky, a peaceful smile on his face. He finally understood the true meaning of his father's legacy. True wealth isn't measured in dollars or stock portfolios, it's measured in the lives you touch and the good you put out into the world. True power lies not in what we display for others to see, but in the quiet integrity of our character. The cruel and the arrogant may build their kingdoms high, but they build them on foundations of sand, destined to be washed away by the tides of truth and justice. Liam had found his true inheritance, and in doing so, he had finally, truly come home.